Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I wanted to do an individual analysis on each game, but I decided that would be kind of counterintuitive, mainly because you can go and watch each game. You can watch the highlights. I felt like my thoughts wouldn't necessarily be that life-changing. Decided I was going to kind of group every team's preliminary games into one video and discuss how I think they did, how I think they're going to do going forward, and if things that I think they need to improve on if they want to get far in this tournament. So today I'm going to be discussing the Houston Dash in the preliminary rounds and how I think they did. As always, timestamps will be in the description below. I'm not going to be showing the highlights, mainly because, again, you can go find those on the internet. CBS is actually doing a really good job, in my opinion, of capturing good highlights. I'd recommend watching CBS's highlights, and I'll leave that link down below if you want to go click on that. Let me know what you think down below, and let's get started. Okay, the first game the Houston Dash played was against Utah Royals, and they tied 3-3. They came out in a 4-3-3 formation with Jane Campbell, Alicia Chapman, Katie Naughton, Megan Oyster, Erin Simon, Christy Mewis, Shea Groom, Haley Hansen, Veronica Latsko, Rachel Daly, and Katie Stengel as the starting lineup. Houston took a minute to find the rhythm. They were having a hard time keeping possession within the midfield, a lot of giveaways, a lot of sloppy passing, but I think, it was their first game of the tournament. That's to be expected. Because they weren't able to get possession going forward, Rachel Daly was having to come back to try to get the ball, which is always a negative thing. If you ever see your lone striker come back to get the ball, that's a sign something is not going well for them. They found success in the wing, but I think it's important to note that Utah came out with a 3-back. That leaves so much room on the wings, especially, because if it doesn't leave room on the wings, it leaves room in between the center backs and the outside backs. And so they were finding a lot of success down that left side. First goal that Rachel Daly scored actually came because of the wide play. Veronica Latsko was able to get in line and play a nice cross to her. Rachel Daly took a great touch and played it in the upper corner. I feel like they came out of both halves, in the first and the second half, with a lot of strong energy, and that's really important, and I feel like it was mostly led by Rachel Daly. But she really was one of the players who came out of the locker room in both halves like, I'm going to score a goal, and I'm going to win this for my team, and I feel like that's the winning mentality that James Clarkson is trying to build with his team. But that has to be a universal feeling. It can't just be from Rachel Daly. It has to be from every player, because if they all build that mindset, it's going to be so much easier for them to create opportunities and score goals. And then in the second half, James Clarkson made some subs. And this is where I feel like we saw a lot of decline in Houston's energy, because Utah was like, okay, y'all are trying to work into it. We've already been out here. We're going to use this to our advantage. And Utah ended up coming back and scoring 2 goals. But I think at the end of the day, that's something that they can learn from going forward, is that maybe they need to keep some more key players on the field instead of making the subs, or the subs they put on have to be ready for that intensity, and we didn't see that. I'm going to talk about the 3 goals we scored. The first one was fantastic team build-up. Again, Veronica Latsko got down the side, played nice across to Rachel Daly, who took a fantastic touch, played it into the goal. And the second goal, Rachel Daly, again with an individual effort, she beat her defender, she beat Rachel Corsi, and she got her head on the ball. And again, that's exactly what you need coming out of halftime as a goal. And then Shea Groom got the third goal. That was a fantastic shot. It was one time. It had a lot of pace. It was perfectly placed. You couldn't ask for a better shot than that. It was a fantastic goal. Utah didn't mark, and she was able to take advantage of that. The 3 goals we gave up. So Alicia Chapman and Katie Naughton got split on defense, allowing Amy Rodriguez to run in behind and play her cross off. And Simon didn't cover her mark. But yeah, she gave up her mark, and Diana Matheson scored. The second goal, Vera Bouquete had a freaking perfect goal. That was amazing. I love seeing set-piece goals in women's soccer. It's just so beautiful. The third goal, given up by a foul really late in the game, and they played a nice cross in, and Cece Kaiser lost her mark, and Sierra King was able to get ahead on it. And there had been a lot of goals scored from headers, or in the air, or on set pieces, because players lose their mark. And so I think that is definitely something that Houston has to work on, is marking in the box, and making sure that they close out the game, because they blew a 2-0 lead, and that's honestly not a very positive thing. So that's something they're not going to be happy with. They won 2-0. I was very surprised by this scoreline, because I said coming into this tournament, I thought OL Reign was going to do really good. And spoiler alert, they did, well, currently, they're doing very bad. Houston came out in a 4-3-3 formation with Jane Campbell, Alicia Chapman, Katie Naughton, Megan Oyster, Ali Prysock, Shea Groom, Sophie Schmidt, Brianna Vasali, Katie Stengel, Christy Mewis, and Rachel Daly all in the starting lineup. The first goal was scored because Shea Groom put a lot of pressure on Casey Murphy, who ended up playing a really bad pass to Kristen McNabb. She was put in a terrible position, so she ends up having a bad touch. Brianna Vasali wins the ball from her. Rachel Daly makes a run down the sideline, which is literally the perfect run. Couldn't have been better because it pulls Lauren Barnes out of position, allowing Shea Groom to have enough space and time to receive the ball, have a nice flick to Christy Mewis, who just places it in the corner. No pressure on her because Amber Brooks is like, do I mark Christy Mewis or do I mark Shea Groom? The second goal is kind of similar to the first goal Shea Groom scored. Sophie Schmidt plays a great ball over top to Rachel Daly, again catching them out of position. Rain's back line got exploited again. Rachel Daly is able to take the ball, dribble to the inline, has all the time in the world to pick out her cross, sends it to Shea Groom, who is not being marked by literally anybody, and she heads it perfectly into the corner. So that, again, a great team build-up. Something we learned from this game is if they come out strong and they're able to get on the board quickly, the game completely changes in their favor. They came out in a 4-5-1 with Jane Campbell, Erin Simon, Katie Naughton, Megan Oyster, and Allie Prysock in the back, Cammie Privet, Christy Mewis, Haley Hansen, Shea Groom, Christine Nairn, and Rachel Daly. So they lost this game 2-0. They didn't really come out strong in this half, but I think a lot of that had to do with the way Sky Blue was playing. Both teams were struggling to find their groove in the first 10 minutes of the game, and it was kind of sloppy, but again, they couldn't keep possession. They'd win the ball, they'd turn it over, and there weren't really many good opportunities, but then Sky Blue scored. So the first goal that Houston gave away was a split ball. Katie Naughton and Megan Oyster got split. Not enough pressure on Anu Manu. She had plenty of time to pick out her pass. Played it right between two of them. Paige Monahan ran in behind, took a touch around Jane Campbell, and just passed it in the goal. And a lot of that can be said about not only Houston's defense, but their midfield. They should have gotten pressure on Anu Manu quicker. And the backline should have been aware that Paige Monahan was making that run in behind. And Jane decided to come off her line and try to make a play on it. Maybe she should have stayed. I don't think she was necessarily in the wrong in that situation. So the second goal, Cujo played a ball over top to Anu Manu. And Katie Naughton, I feel like, could have dealt with that. But Jane Campbell decided to come out and clear the ball. She's at this point at the top, if not outside of her 18-yard box, and she plays a bad clearance. In that situation, if you're going to come out, you better clear the ball, and I mean send it down to the other end of the field, not make a half clearance. Because it went straight to Kawasumi, who took a touch and was like, oh, Jane Campbell is really far off her line and there's no one in behind her. I'm going to kick it over her head. She lofted it over top and we got scored on. Something so silly that could have been prevented, and that's a miscommunication between the two of them. Now, Katie Naughton has never played with Jane Campbell. She's on a new team. She has a new center back pairing, so that's something to consider as well, is that their back line is a completely new structured back line. Houston in the first half could not find Rachel Daly in threatening spaces. As a team, they couldn't get forward. In the midfield, they couldn't hold the ball. They were too direct, and just overall, after those two goals, it completely tanked their mentality. And coming out of the second half, Sky Blue kind of let off the pedal a little bit, made some subs, and you noticed Houston kind of seemed to get back into the game, but they couldn't capitalize on their opportunities in the second half. In the final third in the second half, Katie Stengel was completely off. Her passes weren't connecting. Her runs weren't threatening enough. And just overall, her and Rachel Daly were not on the same page. And I think a lot of frustration was evident in that second half, and that's something I'll talk about again about the game they actually played today, is that once things aren't going their way, they get frustrated, and that cannot happen. Once that frustration sits in that, oh my gosh, our team sucks, we can't score, we can't do this, that's when you start believing that, and that's when you start playing even worse. And so Houston lost 2-0. The last game of the preliminary round, they played the Washington Spirit, and going into this, I thought the Spirit were going to win, and they ended up winning 1-0. So Houston lost. Houston came out in a 4-3-3 formation with Jane Campbell, Alicia Chapman, Katie Naughton, Allie Prysock, Erin Simon, Christy Mewis, Shea Groom, Sophie Schmidt, Rachel Daly, Veronica Latsko, and Katie Stengel all starting. They came out with possession, they came out with energy, but again, we noticed that they get scored on, and then their game plan just goes out the door. Washington had something like 7 or 8 shots by halftime, which is insane. Washington had all the possession. They were controlling the game. The ball was in their court. They were doing everything. And Houston couldn't seem to bounce back from that. Every time Houston got the ball, they either had sloppy passes or they'd send it super direct to Rachel Daly up top, but most of the time they would just roll to Aubrey Bledsoe. Do I think Jane Campbell could have saved the first goal? Absolutely not. It was great team build up to Yokoyama. She played it to Ashley Hatch, who played it to Bailey Feist, who had a great touch. Literally perfect placement. Nothing Jane Campbell could have done about that. Now defensively, there could have been more press. Not to mention, Houston's midfield could not keep up. Sophie Schmidt couldn't keep up. Chrissy Mewis couldn't keep up. Shea Groom is not a holding midfielder. Her distribution skills in terms of possession in the midfield was not what that team needed. And it was very evident. They were getting played around. They were getting played through. They were caught out of position. They were super stretched. And you have to give credit to Washington because they play a super possession-oriented game. And when you're running all over the place trying to get the ball, it tires you out. And so, again, they should have been more patient in their press and sitting in their defensive block, but they weren't. And they got pulled out. Their back line got stretched, dismantled, and they got scored on. Andy Sullivan unfortunately went down with an injury around the 50th minute, which completely changed the tide for the Spirit. Around the same time, they made some subs, and the game kind of sort of shifted. But again, Houston couldn't find a sort of threatening attack until super late in the game. At this point, Washington changed their formation to be a more defensive block. They wanted to ride out their win. But this was a perfect opportunity for the Dash to score, but they couldn't. They were too rushed in the final third. There were so many opportunities where I felt that they could have taken another touch or another pass or could have been a little bit more patient in their build-up. Instead, they tried to force it. They tried to force across the shot, and it got deflected, and then Washington would just boot it down the field. And no one was composed enough to say, hey, let's take it slow. Let's settle it down. We have 20 minutes left in the game. This is a lot of time. Let's create a threatening build-up, and let's score. And they couldn't do that. Overall, their back line got beat, their midfield was too slow, and up top nobody was on the same page. My thoughts going into the quarterfinals. I'm filming this before we know the official schedule, so I'm going to make another video, just one video total, where I discuss how each team is going to play, or how I think they're going to play, or how I think they should come out, etc. In the quarterfinal match. But overall, a theme we've noticed with Houston is they come out strong, they get scored on, and then that's it. Overall, I think a lot of that has to do with the team mentality. They don't have that winning mentality yet, and that's okay. It's something they're working on. But again, mentality is like the most important part, in my opinion, about how to win games consistently. As you see North Carolina, they come into every single game expecting to win. And it's not just one player who believes that, it's every single player. So Rachel Daly coming out thinking she's going to win, that's great, but every single player on the field has to be on the same page or else it's not going to work. And again, another thing I wanted to point out about Houston is they get frustrated super easily, and that's not a good thing. Like I mentioned earlier, frustration only leads to forced passes, sloppy passes, just irrational thoughts in the way that you play, and that's not what you need, especially when you're trying to score goals. Not to mention, when you get frustrated with your teammates, it shows on the field. You can see Rachel Daly get angry that the pass wasn't where she wanted it, and it's like, yeah, that was a mistake, but there's another opportunity we can find. Let's try to settle down and try it again. And when you start experiencing frustration between teammates, it creates this sort of bitterness and tension, and that's not what you want. Never. That's not what you want in a team. Because, again, it just makes it harder to win. I think if Houston wants to get anywhere in this tournament, they need to be able to keep their consistency in terms of their energy on the field. It has to be consistent. They come out strong, they let off the pedal, and then that's it. They do it in both halves. They come out strong, and then that's it. Or they make a last-minute push in the 80th minute to try to score. It can't be like that. They have to come out with their plan, with their energy, and keep it consistent. Because if they don't, again, they're just playing into the other team's game plan, and that's never the type of team you want to be. You want to make a team change to your plan, not the other way around. The backline has to be more disciplined in terms of spacing in between. So, for example, Alicia Chapman and Katie Naughton cannot get split. Katie Naughton and Megan Oyster cannot get split. And in terms of every single player, they all have to be on the same page. They have to keep a high line. If they're going to play a low line, then the midfield has to be able to drop with them, because then if they don't, it's just going to be whichever team plays them dribbling at their back line with all this time in the world. And again, every single line on the field, from defense to midfield to forward, has to be on the same page. And if they're not, you're going to see get pulled apart, and that's what leads to goals being scored. I think the thing I wanted to talk the most about, though, was their game plan in terms of the final third. They are so direct with their approach, and personally, I don't like direct style of play. I think there's a time and place for it. For example, when Rachel Daly played across the Shea Groom, that was direct play, but again, that's not always going to be on. There are going to be some teams like North Carolina who are really disciplined with their entire back line and with their midfield, when to drop, when to play low line, when to play high line. And there's some teams like the Washington Spirit whose goalkeeper comes off their line. For example, you play a ball over top, she's going to come out and kick it. So there's not always going to be this space in behind for Rachel Daly to run onto it. And we've seen with Veronica Latsko and Katie Stengel, they're not fast players. They're definitely skilled. I think in their respect, they're better at hold-up play in terms of getting the ball, acting as more of like a 10 and then turning and playing it, spraying out wide. But if that's how you're going to play, then everybody has to be on the same page. There's no point in playing a long ball over top to Katie Stengel to try to run onto it, because she's not going to get to it. You can't have your game plan be revolved around one single player up top being your main goal scorer, because it will not work. All you have to do defensively is put 2 players on them and they're shut down the entire game. That's how people would play against Sam Kerr. That's how Chicago right now is in a transition phase, because that was their game plan, and now they're like, oh, what do we do? So there's a lot Houston has to work on. I don't personally think Houston's going to get very far in this tournament. I think they're promising, but again, I don't think they're consistent enough in the final third or in their defensive third. And I think just cohesion and the chemistry is off between all of them. And I think overall the team attitude has to get better. But again, they're a team that has a lot of individual players who are really unexpected in the way that they play. And so you cannot count them out. You can't take them lightly. Given the opportunities they've had and the goals they've scored, I think they have potential. But again, I'm really excited to see how Houston can develop going forward. Because again, I was expecting them to be really poor. But they've really surprised me with how good they've been. But again, that quality just has to extend to every single player on the team. That's all for me today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you enjoyed the format. Let me know down below how you think Houston's going to do. If you think they're going to do good, going to do bad. Yeah, stay tuned for my other videos. I'm going to release a video about every single team. Like, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Make sure to subscribe. Let me know what you think down below, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye-bye!